Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast of Indigenous Roots and Hoots. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and my guest today is Paul Quassa. Paul Arulak Quassa, E51231, is an Inuk. He was born in Manituk, a small traditional camp near the community of Igloolik, which is where he resides now. Paul lived the traditional life for the first years of his life in traditional Inuit camp. Paul then went on to attend residential school in Chesterfield Inlet. Shortly after, I guess he must have been about 6-7 years old when he left. He's also attended Churchill Vocational Center, another residential school in Churchill, Manitoba. Later on in life, he attended the Algonquin College in Ottawa. Paul has also worked with the Inuit Tapirisat of Canada in the Land Claims Department. He went on to work as a chief negotiator for Nunavut Legislative the land claims body that eventually helped create the territory of Nunavut. Paul was also a mayor in his hometown of Igloolik, chairman of Nunavut Land Use Planning Commission in the early 2000s for 6 years and president of the Association of Nunavut Municipalities. He then went on to be elected to the newly created Nunavut Legislative Assembly, representing his community of Igloolik. He was the Minister of Education for 4 years, and then he became the Premier. And then his last gig was the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. Good afternoon, or should I say good morning, Paul. Nice to have you here. And maybe we could start by talking about your community, where you're from and how life was, what your community is like. Igloolik, talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gord. It's a pleasure to be talking with you again and finally seeing you. And I wish the best for everyone who is watching. I was born back in 1952 and was born with the name Arulak. And my second name was Kungatadlorikto. Again, that's very traditional. Arulak was my father's stepfather, and I'm named after him. And Kungatadlorikto was my father's biological mother. So in the traditional way, it doesn't matter whether you are named after a woman or a man. And that's always been the case in our traditional way. And so I was born Arulak Kungatadlorikto. And in those days, interestingly, the reason why I gave you that E5 number is we were given disc numbers. And my disc number, or dog tag, as we can refer to, was E51231. And I was probably the 1,231st child that was born as an Eskimo in those days. Because in those days, we didn't exercise the family name kind of thing. We didn't have surnames, as the English always carry on. You know, we didn't have surname until in the late 70s. We started finally getting surnames. And Quassa is, my father chose Quassa as our family name because that was his father's, biological father's name, Quassa. So we all became Quassa. And then that disc number that I just mentioned evaporated kind of thing. Thank
Right.
God. I grew up in Manituk, where my grandfather had camped and made it into our traditional camp. Our grandfather was there. All my uncles, some of my aunts were still there. So it was like a family camp, traditional camp, where we moved from one location to another. It depended on what season of the year it was. So Manituk was our wintering camp. And then in the spring, we moved to another location. And it depended on what animals we were going to be hunting that year. So we would move from one camp to another. And then by the following winter, we'd go back to Manituk because that was our winter camp. We had sod houses. But I was born in an igloo. And I think we were the last generations to experience that truly traditional way of life, where we had great respect for our parents, our grandparents. We had to do various tasks. It depended how old you were. The moment that you were able to participate in the hunting parties, we would go. And of course, living very traditionally, we were always scared of kadlunaks,
Right.
meaning non-Inuit, kadlunaks.
Yeah.
That's how we grew up. And every time, we heard about Palisi, RCMPs, but they were the most scariest ones because your parents would say, "Don't do anything bad, or you're gonna be taken away." Here we are little kids and we're very scared of kadlunak.
What type of animals did you hunt?
In those days, around our area, it depended on what season we hunted. We mostly hunted seals. Walrus was another one that was hunted around that area. Narwhals, and of course, various migratory birds.
Caribou?
Caribou and polar bears. But polar bears were very rare. You had to go quite a distance for caribou. It took about 2 weeks at a time to get caribou in those days. Because again, the only means of transportation was dog teams. This was way before snowmobiles or any type of machinery ever came up north. So all traveling was done by dog teams. And certainly my dad had his own dog team. And as children, we would have one dog that we could name. And my dog's name was Tikak. So every child had an opportunity to say, "That's my dog." That was the tradition.
I think most Indigenous people as kids had a dog at some point in their early lives that you got to name and have one dog of your dog team. So you must remember riding in a dog team, going hunting with your father. And tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, by that time, Igloolik was about maybe 25, 30 miles north of Igloolik. And Igloolik, in my time, around the early 50s, there was already a Hudson's Bay Company in Igloolik and an RC Roman Catholic mission there. So there were only two kind of kadlunaks there. There was a missionary and an Hudson's Bay Company. Those were already there. Apparently, I think in Igloolik, the Roman Catholic Church had built their church around the late 1920s, and Hudson's Bay Company came there shortly afterwards. So there was already a store there. So we would go from Manito by dog team to go to buy supplies to Igloolik, which took us a whole day trip. Right now, with snowmobiles, that's only about 2-hour drive. But with dog team, it usually took about a day. At times, we even had to overnight before we reached Igloolik. I guess it depended on how lazy or energetic your dogs were.
Yeah. Whereabouts, like geographically, where is Igloolik? Your traditional camp is north of the community of Igloolik, where you live now. For our listeners, where would it be? Like, describe where Igloolik would be on the map.
Yeah, if you see the map, there's a big island called Baffin Island. It's right at the northern tip of Baffin Island. And if you look at the map, it's around Fox Basin.
Right.
There's Hudson's Bay, and then Fox Basin is just north of it. It's a little island. Igloolik is just a little island. But where I was born north of it, which is more part of the mainland. Interestingly, which we call Canada.
Okay.
Because Igloolik is a little island just off the mainland.
Yeah.
And even today, people who are going caribou hunting to the mainland say, "I'm going caribou hunting to Canada." And that's interesting because, in those days, we never knew we were Canadians. We never thought of that. In those days, we never thought of there's other people living out there, because our traditional camp only consisted of our relatives. We never saw anybody else. And in my young days, I always thought we were the older ones kind of thing living on Earth.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm reading this book called The Long Exile. It's about the Flahertys who were relocated up to the high Arctic. And the lady who writes the book mentions that there was a group of Inuit that lived like way up in the high Arctic. And apparently they thought the same thing, that they were the only human beings that lived on Earth, around them. They didn't think that there were any other human beings that existed, which is pretty interesting, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Maybe we can just move on a little bit. I've always been fascinated by Inuit and your culture and your people. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Inuit and how they've been able to survive. And not just that, but, the kind of people you are, it's just like always open and friendly and welcoming to other people. When you were young, you attended a residential school in the Igloolik region, the community of Chesterfield Inlet. What was that like? Like, how old were you when you went there, and what was your experience there like? Talk a little bit about your time in residential school.
Yes. Yeah. Just thinking about it is at times very hard, because at that time it was the priest and the RCMP that time that said our parents were told your children have to go to school. I mean, they didn't have a choice, of course, but they were told that if you want to collect family allowance, family allowance, you have to send your child to school. They had no choice. And, a lot of us were taken forcefully because nobody wants to give away a 5 or 6 years old child and send them off.
Right.
That's unorthodox in our culture, but that's the process that we had to go through. I was 6 years old then. Prior to that, I went down south at the age of 5, because in those days there was TB era, tuberculosis, and I was sent down south when I was probably like 5, 6. And then right after I came back, they sent me out to Chesterfield Inlet. In those days, planes were rare to see, but planes came in to pick us up in the fall. And it was a single otter, I remember. We were cramped inside. In those days, there were no seats on the plane. So we all had to sit on the floor. As a single otter, all of us heading down from Igloolik. We had to go through Repulse Bay or Nauyat before reaching Chesterfield Inlet. And as little kids, it's normal if you want to go to the washroom or pee, and this plane didn't have any washrooms, nothing. So the pilot would just land on the lake, get us out, do our own stuff, and hop on the plane again, and off we go again en route to Chesterfield Inlet. It's kind of funny that way. Just landing anywhere for us to do our part.
Yeah, well, at least he landed and allowed you guys to do your thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think the pilots were more humane than the RCMP or the missionaries. But
when you went to Chesterfield, what is the name of that school? Bernier, is it?
Sir Joseph Bernier School.
Right. Yeah. And it was one of hundreds and hundreds of schools that were residential schools that were established across Canada. And that was run by the Roman Catholics, I believe. Talk about your daily life in residential school at Chesterfield.
Yes. The residence was called Turcotil Hall, named after a bishop, Bishop Turcotil. And it's a 3-story building residence, 3-story building. On the 3rd floor would be the girls. They would probably number about 40. On the 2nd floor were the boys. And there were about 40. So all in all, there used to be about 80 students, 80 of us living in that residence, run by the Oblate Fathers. And Chesterfield Inlet was a community that was formed in 1926. There they had built a hospital. It was also run by the nuns, gray nuns they were called. And then all our supervisors were gray nuns. And there were also brothers, I don't know what, brothers, and then there was the priests. So Chesterfield Inlet itself was more like a central location for the priests, for the nuns, for, for that kind of stuff. In the residency school, like every residency school, very disciplined. We were not allowed, to speak our Inuktitut language. We were not allowed to see our sisters, our siblings. It was very disciplinary type of residential school, like probably most likely like any residential schools in those days. You were punished for doing nothing, really. And you went to church every morning at 7 o'clock. It was a very Roman Catholic institution. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then another one at 7 o'clock in the evening. So, I'm surprised we're not holy these days. They were trying to make us really into holy people, I think, in a sense.
Yeah.
In fact, as our toys in a residence school as boys, they even gave us little priest uniforms. When you go to a mass, they put these cloaks and all these things. They even made us all those little miniature things for us to pretend that we were in a mass and conducting a mass. And all the boys, if a lot of us wanted to become priests, because of that. Thank God I never did. But but it was very hard at times, especially not being able to see your sisters. I had two sisters going there and an older brother at the same time.
Yeah.
And we were not allowed to talk with our sisters or see them. Maybe on Saturday we had an opportunity, but the rest of the week, no.
What did they feed you?
Porridge every morning. And only on Christmas Day did they feed us cereal.
Wow.
It was a special treat.
Yeah.
But every morning it was mostly porridge, hot porridge with biscuits. And the funny part was because they knew we were Inuit, I guess, they gave us frozen beef cut into a cube for us to eat.
Beef?
I think, beef, frozen beef. I think because they knew Inuit ate frozen food.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What we also did was we did a lot of trapping. Once we were at a certain age in the winter, we'd do trapping, fox trapping.
Wow.
And we'd catch Arctic foxes. We learned how to clean them. And I don't know where the money went. We did a lot of trapping. All the boys who were able to go out, we used to do, just by walking.
Yeah. How old were you?
We did a lot of trapping. I was like maybe 11, 12, around that age. And we did a lot of trapping for the institution.
Yeah.
I think they used that, they sell them out. We never saw anything. We did a lot of things like that. We also made fish nets. They taught us how to make fish nets. And I don't know where all those fish nets went after we finished them.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of these money-making things which we never saw or used. And it was all, I think it all went to the residency school or the oblates. And
what about soapstone? Did they ever give you a soapstone to carve?
No. It was mainly fox trapping, fish net making. Yeah, those were the two main things that they got us to do.
Were you allowed to have any contact with the Inuit of Chesterfield Inlet, like the community members?
No, not really. No real contact, even though we went to school with them. After school, they went their merry way, and then we had our own. So, in fact, it came to a point where, we used to call them Isimayuti, which meant the ones who have homes to go to. And here we are stuck in residential school. And as kids, we'd fight with each other. They teach us that you're residential schools, and we teach, you gotta, It was, I think, even after I went back to Igloolik I went to resident school there for about 8 years. In later years, we started seeing non-missionaries, non-nuns. They started coming in the later years, mid-60s onwards. We started seeing Adluna.
When the government started taking over. Yeah.
That's when, and it was change of, in those days, I think rock and roll was just being born. And
Were you not allowed to go home for Christmas at all? Did you stay there the whole year?
No, we stayed there year round. I mean, well, not year round, but we used to leave Igloolik, let's say beginning of September or end of August.
Yeah.
And we'd be in Chesterfield until the following year in May. We'd go home in May. We stayed there year round. We'd get back home by May, mid-May, and we'd be home from mid-May till September.
That must have been a happy time.
Well, it was, but because we were so grilled into a residential school living and the food and everything, I mean, it was kind of even strange going home, even though you wanted to go home. But It was kind of strange because we were different. We were speaking in Hadlun attitude, in English, and it kind of separated that family bond.
Right.
Because we were gone for so long, the rest of the year, we'd come back, and there seemed to be a gap between us and our parents.
Yeah.
And that broke, I think that, I don't know if that was the whole purpose of missionaries sending us to residency school, but the family tie really broke, at that time, even at a young age, which is so non-Inuit way of rearing children.
Yeah.
And it's
well, that was the government policy, is to try and change Indigenous people from their Indigenous ways to become, non-Native people, to become part of the white society. I guess they kind of, they were kind of succeeded in that way by sending you away and keeping you away from your traditional lifestyle. I remember coming home once from residential school and seeing the big change, and I didn't really like what I saw when I came home. I thought, my grandparents were extremely poor, and their living conditions were extremely poor condition, and I really felt bad, and I think that's kind of what residential school did to a lot of kids, that they kind of, going home, they didn't like what they saw.
I totally agree. I mean, it broke the bond of a family, and even your way of thinking changed. Of course, your language. In our tradition, nobody was ever poor if you were traditional. We never even thought of, we're poor kind of thing. Even when we were living in our traditional camps, we may have been short of food, but that doesn't mean you're poor. It's because the animals are unavailable.
Yeah. When was the first time you ever experienced coming off like your community and, not really meeting any Kalunak white people? When would you say you started realizing that people were racist toward you? It certainly was not in your community. And I know from my experience, I didn't actually feel it. I didn't even know anything about racism until later on, when we started mingling with white people in the South. Would you agree with that?
Yes. If you recall, when in the mid-60s, when we started seeing real Kadluna rather than nuns or priests, and then we had this Kadluna teacher who was so mean, using the yardstick to hit us, throwing students, across the schoolroom for making a mistake. And that's when I started realizing that these Kadlunas, they think they are so such a higher power kind of people. And that's when I realized that they were looking down on us. That made me really feel bad. And I'm sure a lot of us did, because you could see some of the Kadlunas that were looking down on you rather than evenly. And Inuit, our tradition is not like that. We don't look down on people. We just see them at an even level. Yeah. That's how Inuit and all Aboriginal groups were. But I think it was in the mid-'60s I started realizing that, because in the olden days, Inuit seemed so meek in front of the Kadlunas. Whenever there was an RCMP or a Kadluna, oh, Kadluna, look, the big white man, the big white man, Kadluna. Yeah. We made, even the language itself made them sound big.
Yeah.
Even my parents used to say, Kadluna, the big white man is going to be coming, like a scary individual.
Okay.
Yeah, I always say that. Thank God I learned the English. I know who they are, and that's one way of getting even.
Right. You've come a long way, Paul. I've known you for quite a number of years now. What are some of the most significant changes have you seen for Inuit over your lifetime since you left residential school or since you were a kid? What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen?
First of all, Inuit are not afraid of Kadlunaus anymore. That's number one.
That's good.
They used to be. Yeah. We're not scared of them anymore.
Yeah.
The other one, of course, is that through the land claims process, I think we finally are able to say that, we can become self-reliant. We can become self-sufficient, as we used to be. And I think I see that changing now. We wanted to retain the independence before Kadluna came. And now I believe we are finally getting to that point. I think in Nunavut, we've been very lucky to create our own government. 85% of our population are Inuit. And therefore, we have a legislature that consists of 99% of them are Inuit. 99% of them are cabinet ministers. 100% of the time, it's an Inuit premier. So I think that itself is a major change. It's going into the right direction. And Inuit traditional knowledge, language are vitally important to retain, which was never an issue in my young days. But now it is, because as we are being encroached by this European style of running things, I think we are able to run that now using our language, which is so vitally important. Inuk, language is so vitally important, and I've always pushed for that. We still have unilingual Inuit out there. It's so vitally important. I think the land claims itself had made a big difference in making Inuit more proud of being who they are. In our young days, it seemed that the Kadlunas made sure you were not proud of who you were. But now we can say we are. It is our hunters that are most important part of our society, our hunters. And they are the ones that started that whole process of, look, we're tired of being given so many laws. Up here, Inuit finally started realizing that I can only eat a polar bear meat at a certain time of the year because of that Canadian law. I can only hunt narwhals at a certain time of the year, where in our traditional way, animals didn't have a season. We could hunt them any time of the year, But once the Canadian law started being imposed on us, it was the hunters that started talking a little bit more. This was in the early 70s now. So I think that has changed a bit. It changed a lot. We now have our own Nunavut Wildlife Management Board, 99% of the members, well, if more than half are members on are Inuit. And I think these institutions that were created out of our land claims are helping out in retaining our self-independence.
Right. In what ways are you most concerned about how fast climate change is affecting the Arctic and the Inuit way of life? You talked about the hunters, right? And how the laws have impacted on them. Like, can you imagine that, climate change is affecting their abilities to harvest animals?
Yeah, yes. For example, this summer, we had a cold summer and Inuit started questioning. Did they say there's climate change? Did they say there's global warming? Boy, it's been a lot colder, cold summer we had this year. So interestingly, Inuit do question that at times because it's still very cold up here and scientists are saying, oh, there's global warming. And yet it's still bloody cold up here sometimes. But I think the animals are moving around a lot more. We see in my hometown in Igloolik, we used to get narwhals. Now they're gone. We cannot hunt them anymore because they're gone. They're moved out someplace. Again, it is because of the climate change. Animals are moving around a lot more. Where there used to be abundance, they're moving on. We're seeing a lot more of non-traditional type of animals coming up here. Bugs, even as, bugs, different types of birds are coming up. So it's changing. It's changing our diet, I think. And certainly the ice forming is very, very different. Springtime is more dangerous than it used to be. We have to be a lot more careful. Even the elders are saying, in the olden days, they would be able to predict the weather just by looking at the sky or the snow, and then they knew how to forecast. But now the elders are saying, because the north wind has changed, it's more to the west, the sun has changed from its rising and setting, it has changed. The wind has changed. The wind used to be from the north, but now it's more the west. And certainly that has affected the ice formation and so forth. So elders are even saying they cannot predict the weather anymore because it has drastically changed.
How do you feel when scientists and other historians say Inuit came from Asia by the way of the Bering Strait? Agree or disagree?
In my mind, I disagree because, my theory is that I think Inuit are more descendants of the Japanese because if you look at that northern tip of Japan, they have an indigenous group called Ainu.
Wow.
And interestingly, their language is very, very similar to Inuit.
Really?
Yeah, interestingly. And I always thought that maybe Inuit are more descendants of Japanese. I don't know. Maybe Japanese came from Mongolia, but that's my theory. But to a certain extent, I would sort of believe that, yes, we did, because there's Inuit in northern Siberia that have the same language, but different dialect from northern Siberia, Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. There's 4 countries that have Inuit. So the theory of us coming from through the Bering Strait doesn't make sense to a certain point because the leftovers are still there in northern Siberia. The base words are always the same. For example, polar bear is nano, for seal it's nutja, for walrus it's isla. And you hear that word all the way from northern Siberia across to Greenland. And that's how we are.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's fascinating, actually, that there are Inuit in... well, I know, I've known this for quite some time, that the Inuit are from Greenland and Alaska. I guess, Siberia in Canada. Yeah,
Yes.
the circumpolar region. And you've been around for thousands and thousands of years. My last question has to do with reconciliation. As you know, that it's been a buzzword in Canada for the last few years, and I think Canadians are going to continue to struggle with this for some time yet. It's not an easy answer. There's no easy solution. And I think it's up to every Canadian to make at least an effort and think about how we can best make this country better for everybody. How do you feel about this whole question about reconciliation, and what do Canadians need to do to make Canada a better country to live in for all Canadians?
Yeah, I believe that, when we hear the word reconciliation, it only kind of refers to Aboriginal group, our Aboriginal people, our Indigenous people in Canada. That's the only ones that we reconciliate. I believe that even non-Inuit have to follow that process. It has to work both ways. It cannot just go from one here to the other. It has to work both ways. Reconciliation means, it's not just from one end to the other only, and like this. It has to work both ways. It has to work both ways. That's the only way reconciliation will work. Both sides does it evenly. I think Canadians have to realize that this is the truth. And that's why it was called Truth and Reconciliation. One has to find truth. Yeah. They have to believe in that truth. Yeah. And not just, maybe they did that. No, it's the truth. And they have to believe. I think non-Inuit have to put that truth in there first before anything can be reconciled. Before that happens, it seems to be one route only.
Yeah.
One way only. Yeah. It has to be both ways.
I agree.
If it's going to work. Yeah.
I think every Canadian, Indigenous or not, no matter where you come from, have to make an effort to understand each other and to make an effort to know the history, and only then the truth, we can move forward. And like I say, the truth will set you free, and we can only then move on, as a country.
Yes.
Continue to heal and become a good country for everybody. The last part of the podcast, well, I don't know if you know this, but our podcast is called Roots and Hoots, and Hoots is about telling something, a funny story or a joke. Indigenous people like to be humorous. Maybe it's part of making us more resilient and adapting, and being able to cope with the difficulties we've gone through in our history. I wondered, Paul, if you have something funny to tell us, a funny joke or a funny incident that's happened in your life.
Yes, a lot. But, I'll tell you, during the negotiations, we took advantage of those kadlunas at one time. When we were negotiating land selections, we got the federal government negotiators to come to our each and individual communities, all 25 communities. And we made sure that we did it during the springtime, because during the springtime, as you know, in the majority of our communities, it's 24-hour daylight. And we're used to that. 24-hour daylight, you can hunt during the day, the night, doesn't matter, it's daylight. And we made sure we did that land selections during the springtime, because we knew they were going to go to our communities. The feds didn't really have a clue, I don't think, what the difference was. But we started negotiating during the morning and all day, and then all night, and then the next morning, and tried to get the feds to get tired, because we're used to staying up all night long in the springtime. And that's how we got some of our better lands then, because we got them so bloody tired. we kept on going. Oh, yeah, we took that advantage. So, yeah, we used to try and take advantages of what we know. And then when we were selecting parts of some lands, the government said, "Oh, we need access across." Okay, so we went back to the elders and say, "Okay, where's the worst access location that you can find?" Okay, all the boulders go through here. It's a valley full of boulders. Okay, we'll take that. Go back to the table and say, "Okay, here's your access." The federal government, not knowing it, said, "Okay, thank you." And we gave them the worst access route that we could think of because we knew they didn't have a clue what it looked like, or they never went there.
Yeah.
And that's how we did a lot of our negotiations using our knowledge and
Traditional knowledge, yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I've been talking to Paul Igloolik, Quassa. This number is E51231. Paul is a leader. He's formerly Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and grandfather, father, and a survivor of residential schools. And I want to take the time on behalf of the Legacy of Hope Foundation to thank Paul for coming on our show and doing this podcast with us. I know you're a busy guy, Paul, but thank you very much for taking this time.
Gordon, thank you, and good to see you.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a good day. Bye.
Okay. Good luck.
Roots and Hoots is produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For more podcasts like this, please visit our website at legacyofhope.ca.